The first time I met him, I didn't even look twice. If I had known who he was, I would have run. But you can't run from a man who has already decided you're his. The first time I met him, I didn't even look twice. If I had known who he was, I would have run. But isn't that the cruelest trick of fate? It never sends the danger wearing a mask. It sends it wearing a quiet smile, holding a cup of coffee, looking at you like you are the only real thing in a room full of ghosts. I was standing in a small cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and a barista who knew my name, arguing over a cup of coffee. The argument was petty, the kind you have when your rent is due and your patience has evaporated. I was so wrapped up in my own small, furious world that I almost missed the shift in the air, that subtle pressure change, like before a storm. Then I felt it. His stare? It wasn't sharp, it wasn't invasive. That's what it terrifies me now, looking back. It was steady, calm, as if he had been looking for something his entire life and had finally, unexpectedly, found it hiding in a girl with chipped nail polish and a temper over a $2 latte. He didn't belong there. That much was obvious. Coat was too fine, his posture too still, his silence too loud. And I didn't care enough to notice him. Not until he didn't look away. Most men do, eventually. Their gaze slides off me like rain off a window, but his stayed. Not hungry, not demanding, just present, as if to say, I see you, and I am not finished looking. That should have been the end of it. A strange moment in a cafe, a story I'd tell my friends and then forget. But it wasn't. He kept showing up. Not in the way you're thinking. There were no grand gestures, no lavish gifts thrust into my hands. He never forced his way into my space. He simply existed in the same moments I did. The park bench where I ate my lunch. The bookshop on the corner where I'd hide from the rain. The quiet street I walked home on, where suddenly his silhouette would appear a few paces behind. Never closer, never farther. Like he was quietly, patiently choosing the same universe I was. It unnerved me at first, until it didn't, until the sight of him became something I looked for. Conversations started slowly. A comment about the weather, a shared umbrella held over my head without a word of payment or expectation. His voice was the first thing I truly noticed about him. Low, rough around the edges, like gravel smoothed by a river. When he said my name, Amara, it sounded different than when anyone else said it. Like a secret. Like a promise he hadn't spoken yet. Those conversations turned into long walks. Long walks turned into something warm. Something that felt safe in a way I wasn't used to. My life had been a series of locked doors and borrowed time. Safety was a concept I read about in books, not something I wrapped myself in. But with him, with this man who still hadn't told me his last name, I felt it. A quiet hum of protection that asked for nothing in return. There was an intensity about him, yes. I'd catch it in the way his jaw tightened when another man looked at me too long. In the way his hand would hover at the small of my back, never quite touching, as if he was afraid his own heat might burn me. But it wasn't suffocating. It felt intentional. Like every word he said, every glance he gave, meant something. Like he was a man who had never wasted a breath in his life, and he wasn't about to start with me. When he kissed me, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't overpowering. He didn't grab me or pull me close like I was something to be claimed. He simply leaned in, slow enough that I could have turned away, and pressed his lips to mine with a certainty that stole the air from my lungs. It was like he had taken his time deciding I was worth it. And in that kiss, I felt the weight of that decision. He hadn't chosen me lightly. He had chosen me like a man choosing a home after years of wandering. And the way he looked at me after, God, the way he looked at me, it wasn't about owning me. It wasn't about possession or pride. It was about value. Like I mattered more than anything else in the room. More than the antique furniture, more than the expensive wine, more than the life he clearly lived when he wasn't walking my quiet streets. Still, there were moments I didn't understand. The quiet way he noticed everything. The way his eyes would scan a room before we entered it. Cataloging exits, faces, threats I couldn't see. The way his presence would shift around me, protective without being asked. He'd walk on the side of the street, closest to traffic. He'd open doors before I reached for them. He'd listen to my rambling stories about my day with the focus of a man decoding enemy intelligence. I told myself he was just attentive, just careful, just a good man with good habits. But the questions stacked up like unread letters. Who was he? Where did he go when he left my apartment at midnight? Why did his phone never stop buzzing with messages he never answered in front of me? And why, when I asked him about his family, did his smile flicker like a candle in a draft? So I followed him one night. I told myself it was curiosity. I told myself I deserved to know. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I followed him because I was already in love with him, and love without trust is just fear wearing a pretty dress. I waited until he left my place, pressing a kiss to my forehead that lingered a beat too long, as if he knew something I didn't. Then I pulled on my coat and slipped out into the rain. He didn't walk to a car, he walked to a convoy. 3 black SUVs, engines idling, men in dark suits emerging like shadows given form. They opened the door for him. They scanned the street with the mechanical precision of guards who had seen violence and survived it. The way people moved when he stepped in, not with fear exactly, but with recognition. A deference that had nothing to do with respect and everything to do with survival. My feet were frozen to the wet pavement. The rain soaked through my coat, through my hair, through the thin walls I had built around my heart. I watched the SUVs pull away, their taillights bleeding red into the dark, and I felt the ground tilt beneath me. I went home. I dried off. I sat on my couch with my laptop, and I did what any woman in my position would do. I searched for him. I didn't even have his last name, but I had his face, burned into my memory. And I had the way he moved, the way the world bent around him. It took 12 minutes. Devereaux. The name sat on my screen like a verdict. I clicked the first link, then the second, then the 10th. My chest tightened with every scroll. Billionaire, ruthless, untouchable. His face stared back at me from magazine covers and financial journals and tabloid headlines with words like empire and heir and enigma. There were photos of him at galas and tuxedos that cost more than my yearly rent. Photos of him shaking hands with politicians and oligarchs, and men whose names I only knew from news reports. About wars I couldn't find on a map. And then there were the other photos, the ones that made my stomach drop. Photos of empty buildings with his name on the permits. Photos of labor strikes and lawsuits and settlements with NDAs so tight they might as well have been handcuffs. The man I was falling for wasn't just a man. He was a world I didn't belong in. A world I didn't even want to visit. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark and I replayed every moment, every gentle word, every careful touch, every time he looked at me like I was something precious. Was it all a performance? Was I just a secret he kept in a quiet corner of his ruthless life? A hobby, a distraction. A girl with chipped nail polish who didn't know enough to be dangerous. By morning I was hollow and angry. And heartbroken in a way that felt like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out something I hadn't known I needed. He came to my door at noon. He always came at noon. He had coffee. 2 cups. Mine with too much sugar. His black. He smiled when I opened the door, that quiet smile that had once made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. Now, it just looked like a mask. I didn't let him in. "We need to talk," I said. My voice shook. I hated that it shook. His smile faded. Not into anger, but into something worse. Understanding, as if he had been waiting for this moment, dreading it, and now that it had arrived, he was simply relieved that the waiting was over. "I know," he said,